All right, everybody. So it is 2:03. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I do see some familiar faces on here. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Corey Hawkins, and I'm a learning engagement facilitator with Pivot Point. First of all, I would just like to thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. I know right now the state of the world and everything, just probably in your own particular states, is the transition happened very quickly, and it's just a very uneasy feeling at times. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. For those of you, I would like you to utilize the chat function and go ahead and tell me what state you're from and whether you are a barber or whether you are a stylist. If you would for me, please. So again, just a real quick, what state you're from and whether you are a barber, a stylist, or maybe you're dual licensed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Wanda Paduano from Maryland,
Yes.
Lade School of Hair Design. And
excellent.
I love Pivot Point. I am so lucky to have met the founder and square dance with
perfect. Oh, that's excellent. I wish I would have had that opportunity as well.
Yes, he was a wonderful man. And his wife too.
Yes, very much so. And his son is just as wonderful.
Yes, very much.
Perfect. So I see a lot of stylists are on the call, which is absolutely amazing. I think that you guys are really going to find this pretty useful to you. I would also like to give a big shout out to my partners in crime, both Daniel Dunworth and Jason Russell, who are both on the call as well. They are on my team at Pivot Point, and these guys have been nothing but brothers to me ever since I first started. So again, thank you very much for telling me what state you're from and whether you're a barber, stylist, or both. Basically today, I'm going to be focusing a lot of tapered cut and fade theory and what the big difference is between tapered cuts and fades and all of the different components that go along with that. As you can see here, we'll be going through gradation and how that relates to tapered cuts and fades, what taper cuts actually are, fades, outlining, hair graphics, and facial hair transitions. At any time, if you have a question whatsoever, I want you to feel free to use that chat box, or you can also unmute yourself and ask a question then. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So as an exploratory question, with so many tapered cuts, tapered haircut and fade options available to you, how do you choose what's best for your client? When we think of tapering and fading hair, we know there's a lot of different components that go with that. Hair growth patterns, the different ways that we can fade and taper hair. We can fade moving in an upward direction. We can fade in a downward direction. We know that even bone structure might even have a big play in that. So if you would take just a moment here and in your chat box, kind of give me some answers that are already going through your mind. With all of the different options available to you, how would you really kind of really narrow down what you think would be best for each client that maybe you're working with? And for those of you that have not muted, there's a little bit of background noise. So if you could just click your mute button for us, we'd appreciate it. Lifestyle, features, maintenance, good. Head shape, good. Career is another really good one as well. depends on what they want, to the conversations and pictures. Texture, good. So perfect. So really our inspiration here, you know, a barber and or stylist who performs excellent taper haircuts and fades will always be in high demand. If you could, in your chat box, give me a yes or a Y for yes and an N for no, if you think that the men's business has really seen a progression, maybe in the past, let's just take the past 2 years and how big the men's business has really gotten. I see a lot of Y's coming through, which is excellent. That's absolutely amazing. You know, I can speak to you from my personal experience when we talk about, you know, barbers and hairstylists in the men's business being in high demand. Just to give you a little bit of history about myself, before I started at Pivot Point, I used to work for Ruzel. And Ruzel has a barbershop in Rotterdam, which is called Skordum. And they are hands down, unarguably, the most popular barbershop around the world. When we talk about being in high demand, the barbershop opens up at 9 a.m. Usually people are already in line about 60 minutes prior to opening. And usually the average wait time for a haircut is 8 hours. It doesn't matter what barber you're gonna see actually in that barbershop, but usually the average wait time is about 8 hours. So when we talk about the craft, and if you can really hone in on those skills at how much high demand that you're going to be in. All right, so what will you achieve? Define and explain gradation and how it relates to tapered cuts and fades. For some of you, gradation might be a different term, okay? Gradation is really just a very short form of graduation. So thinking of graduation going from shorter to longer as we travel up the head. Describe and explain various types of tapered cuts and fades. We all know that from all the social media, maybe it's Pinterest, maybe Instagram, Facebook, even just a Google search, we see men's hair on every different spectrum in every single different way. Describe and explain outlining and its effects on the overall finished look of a haircut. And maybe what do we mean by outlining? Do we mean that we want nice crisp edges, or do we want just that really nice soft look? So which would indicate that that would be a much prolonged grow out. Define and describe various types of graphics. Graphics can also be, maybe we're gonna do a tattoo shape in somebody's head as well. Describe facial hair transitions, which, you know, to me, especially being dual licensed, and I deal a lot on the barbering side of the house, facial hair transitions is a really, really big thing. I'm sure that a lot of you that are on the call right now have probably been on some webinars with Daniel Dunworth. Right now, I've always been very jealous of Daniel's beard. Unfortunately, everything that I have right now usually takes me almost a month to grow, where Daniel could probably shave and maybe by 5 o'clock, he would already have what I have now. But the reason that I'm bringing that up is Daniel right now has really long hair. But when I first met Daniel, Daniel had one of the most beautiful fades I had ever seen. And Daniel and I have been fortunate enough to work with Sophie Polk, which is Stay Gold 31 on Instagram. And I remember very distinctly last year, Daniel being a model on stage for Sophie, and the way that she blended his facial hair into basically what was almost just a bald fade, kind of right in this general area here. It was like nothing I had ever seen. And Daniel, I'm sure that if you wanted to unmute yourself, that is probably one of the first things that you brought to my attention as well, is how beautiful that transition was and how important it is, especially from a male standpoint that likes to wear a really nice full beard, but maybe wants to have that really nice bald clean fade, at how important it is to have that blend in and have a nice clean transition to where it doesn't look like there's just a super, super harsh line and a really big disconnection. So with
Totally
that,
true. I'll back that up. Just so you know, sorry, it took me a minute to get unmuted, but totally back it up. Having
okay.
having that transition is really, I think, what separates you know, the technique, the craft from the hard separation that many people don't refine.
Absolutely, 100%. So when we're looking at these two images, So if we're looking at a tapered cut versus a bald fade, when I look at maybe a fade on the right-hand side here, we see a lot of scalp exposure. When I look on the left-hand side and I see a tapered haircut, I see that there's zero transparency except for maybe just right along where the sideburn area is, up above the ear, and right in the nape area there. So tapered cuts are generally a little bit longer and they have defined outlines along the ears, the sides, and the nape of the neck. Fades seem to do that as well, except we have a lot of skin exposure where we have all transparency around the natural hairline, around the ears, and then also around the nape as well. So gradation, very short version of graduation. At Pivot Point, we basically refer to gradation as anything less than 1/4 of an inch. Lengths increase from shortest along the hairline to longer toward the interior. That might also be a very different term for you as well. At Pivot Point, we break down the head as ICE. So we can think of the top as being the interior, the crest or the parietal ridge being the widest part of the head, and then the exterior being the sides and the back of the head. So here's some gradation facts. Overcomb techniques are going to be used for this because if we think that if gradation means hair that's going to be 1/4 of an inch or shorter, it's going to be very, very hard for us to control that hair with our fingers. So usually overcomb techniques are always going to be used in gradation. Parting, distribution, and projection are really not applicable right now because we're doing so much overcomb work. A lot of freehand techniques are used. It's also known as tapering. So right here where we see short gradation creates transparency. And we have an overcomb line of inclination. If we're looking at the model on the right-hand side here, we see that there's a 90-degree angle, and then that purple line is going to show you that that right there is going to be a very close line of inclination. So when we talk about short gradation, like this model on the left, that's going to create transparency. So low gradation. Sorry, technical difficulty. So low gradation, meaning that if we're looking at the nape, low gradation is going to create the least amount of transparency. So again, if we look at the head model, on the right-hand side, we see our 90-degree angle, but we see that purple line is a little bit further out now. And when we look at the yellow, that's going to create, or that's what's going to represent the graduation, or what we also refer to as gradation, which means that that line of inclination means that it's starting at the nape and it moves away from the head extremely quickly, meaning that we're not going to have a lot of transparency. Medium gradation, we can see that that line of inclination on that right-hand side is going to be a little bit closer to the head. And if we've already explained that we divide the head from ICE, we can see that that line of inclination basically rests right at that crest area, or the widest part of the head, also meaning the parietal ridge. And then high gradation, if we look at that yellow line, that means that it's going to be even closer to the head. Now, there's one thing that's really, really consistent with a lot of these, and as we start to move through this and you look at the imagery, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. But whether we're talking about low gradation, medium gradation, or high gradation, there's something that's very consistent between the three of those. The fact is, no matter how high or how tight we keep that fade, right in this area here, right where that crest area is, especially right back here, we're going to build a little bit of weight and we're going to preserve a little bit of that length. You know, when we think about how we look at a haircut, and you can utilize the chat function on this, and I'm going to assume that I'm going to see a lot of Ys. I don't like to assume, but I'm just going to assume that I'm going to see a lot of Ys on this. is that how many times have you been walking down the street and a guy might look at you face on, walking right at you, and you think, wow, that is a beautiful head of hair and a really well executed haircut. But as soon as you look to the side, you kind of jump back for a second and you think, what exactly happened there? And you look at it and you think, okay, maybe that stylist or that barber took that clipper right at the nape and just ran all the way up, and we started to cut into the top of the head, meaning that we are going to expose that flat spot. So just really quick, give me a Y for yes or an N for no if you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, just so I can. Sorry, I was going to share something with you, but my computer is being difficult right now. I see a lot of Y's coming through, which means that everybody knows what I'm talking about. So the cause and effect relationship, the higher the line of inclination, the closer the comb travels along the head shape. The shorter, the shorter the resulting hair lengths, we're going to see more transparency than that. So when we talk about transparency, utilize your chat box and tell me, what does the word transparency mean to you? Good. See through? Good. Good. You can see the scalp. Perfect. Exactly. So that's really what we mean about transparency. You know, if a guest came in, sat down, and said, "Yeah, you know what? I really don't know what I want. Maybe I want a number, 1 on the sides, but I don't want to see any transparency." Well, we know as an artist, whether you're a learner or a seasoned veteran, or from the educator standpoint, we know that if we don't want to see any transparency, then a number 1 probably isn't the right way to go. There's a few different things that we can talk about when we look at transparency. An uneven color might actually create transparency as well. Different growth pattern shifts. A lot can affect transparency, but we have to be very mindful of it is exactly what we're doing. A fade creates varying degrees of actual scalp or skin exposure, plain and simple. So again, created when short lengths stand out from the head and expose the scalp. So when we talk about different tapered haircuts, so between these 3 images, how you utilize your chat function and tell me how popular you think that these 3 haircuts are and how versatile those might be. Yep, number 1 and number 2 definitely are. Popular and versatile, very much so. So, when we talk about tapered cuts, there are a few different things that are actually, very, that are very distinct to a tapered cut. They're very well blended, shortest lengths at the nape and the side perimeter of the hairline. They get progressively longer toward the crown or the top of the head. It conforms to the curvature of the head in the exterior. There's usually no visible weight lines. And if you had a weight area, it would normally be above the crest, or it'd be above that parietal ridge. Transparency and tapered cuts can occur at the nape and the sideburns only. So I would say that if somebody really had a hard time understanding the difference between a tapered cut and a fade, is that the only time that transparency would be shown is at the sideburns and at the nape of the neck in a tapered haircut. Tapered haircuts can also be very popular with a female client who likes to wear short hairstyles as well. It allows men to wear longer lengths, and it creates interior movement and styling flexibility. So the low tapered haircut, which is probably one of the most popular that I actually do myself. It offers a lot of styling flexibility. The basic cuts for long, classic textured pompadour looks. It creates a shape that complements a narrower head shape, and it usually consists of low gradation performed from the nape hairline up to the occipital bone. How many of you can utilize your chat function for this, but how many of you think that this right here has to be one of the most popular looks that we see on social media? Or maybe it comes and goes a little bit. For sure, the length on top especially. Absolutely. I see it short and longer, for sure. Very good. So then moving from a low tapered cut, we transition to a mid tapered cut, which a mid tapered cut is actually, it's really called a classic taper. It's ideal for more traditional hairstyles. It's popular with clients who prefer a very slick as well as a very highly textured look as well. The shortest lengths, again, are going to be right in that front hairline to right above the ear to also in the nape as well. But remember, one thing that we already covered is that line of inclination is going to be a little bit further up the head as well. Then we move into a high tapered cut. A high tapered cut is often worn for tight shapes as well as trendy or textured and spiky looks. I would say that this particular haircut here comes and goes very quickly, but it also sticks around as well. How many of you enjoy seeing this haircut? And how many of you are sick of seeing this haircut? Utilize your chat function for that. This type of haircut, it takes a very ideal head shape for this. Not love, but not sick of it. Very common. Universally flattering on most. I would definitely agree with that as well. So this next, what we're going to look at. So this is what is always requested by clients as a taper. It's short, uniformly layered, cut with graduation and tapering. It creates a small amount of transparency along the hairline above the ear and the nape. And to really understand what a client is asking for when they refer to a haircut as, from a specific name. I can speak to you from, my own personal experience, especially being in the barbering world. This image here is basically what I would refer to as just an absolute classic taper. It's very short all over. And it does have a very distinct look because it's so different than what a fade is. And even whether we're talking about a low fade, a mid fade, or a high fade, just a regular quote unquote taper is a very distinctive look. So now we start getting into fades. So fades create a shape, a shade effect that shows a smooth transition or a gradient of color from full scalp visibility to no scalp visibility and no transparency. Utilize your chat function and tell me if anybody right now just flat out does not like to fade hair or you're super uncomfortable fading hair. Currently a Cosmo student and you want to also do barbering, super uncomfortable, feel like it's a challenge, uncomfortable fading hair. Okay. And really, you know, I would say that from the learner standpoint, you know, I think the truth of the matter is, you know, I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I've been in your shoes multiple times. I know that very earlier in my career, you know, I started off as a cosmetologist, graduated cosmetology school, went to work for a salon. And after I did an 18-month apprenticeship, I graduated my apprenticeship and then I got my own chair. I learned very quickly that I gravitated towards men's hair. And I think that, you know, when we really talk about hair cutting, especially in the men's business, when we're talking about cutting short hair, it's very hard to hide a mistake. I can tell you that my first day on the floor when I was an actual stylist and I was cutting this very precise angle moving forward bob, and I mean, I'm talking very steep angle. I had to pretend like I cut my finger so I could go in the bathroom and actually gather my thoughts and think, oh my, how am I going to hide this giant mistake that I just made? However, when I started to transition into really starting honing in on my skills on cutting men's hair, I knew that I cannot tell you at how many mannequins I burned through, because I knew that I wanted to get really good at fading hair. I wanted to get really good at tapering hair as well. But I knew that if I was going to make that mistake on a woman's hair, and I knew that I had hair to hide it, I was scared to death to put literally a blade, a clipper blade to somebody's skin and actually just start fading hair, because I knew I was not going to be able to hide it in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. So I can fully appreciate and I can fully understand that when I see a lot of these coming through, that it's very intimidating and there's no room for error. I see capital, all caps, I hate it, super uncomfortable. Usually that's the most popular consensus when we're very first starting out. But the one thing that I would like for you to be very mindful of, and I still do it to this day, and I've been in the business for 10 plus years now, I still cut on a mannequin head every single week. There's something to learn every single day, specifically when we talk about fading hair. I'm always learning something new. And I know that Daniel and I are always bouncing ideas off of each other as well. Daniel can show me something where I might think, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that, and vice versa as well. So again, I fully understand where you're coming from. So when we talk about a low fade, okay, when we talk about that there's being 3 different types of fades, a low, medium, and a high fade, we talk about there being a temple peak point, and we can see it on the right-hand side here. Your temple peak point is basically, think of that as your landmark. That's going to be your landmark of thinking, okay, do I need to keep this fade low, medium, or high? There are a few different factors when we talk about what type of fade that we're going to be doing. And I see some of you actually had already answered that. We talk about considerations that we need to take into play are what career they do. You know, maybe they're very business oriented. Maybe they're an attorney. Maybe they're a doctor. We know that we're probably not going to be doing a high fade on somebody like that. One thing that I always take into consideration, no matter what, is bone structure. I always think of the occipital bone and that mastoid process. So the mastoid process being those bones that are right behind the ears, and obviously the occipital bone as well. I'm always looking for protrusions, especially when we talk about bone structure. I can tell you right now that the model on the left-hand side here has a beautiful head shape, and he would basically be what your ideal candidate would be for a low fade. And I say that with confidence because you can expose that skin from the occipital bone down without seeing any protrusions whatsoever. Now, on the flip side of that, let's say that this particular model had a occipital bone that stuck out really far. Utilize your chat function and tell me, maybe you've been on the clinic floor, or maybe you've just seen this in your own experience, that maybe we took the fade a little bit too high and we exposed that occipital bone. The reason that I say that is one thing, again, from personal experience that I always take into consideration is the nose. Somebody might have a perfect nose, perfect shape, perfect size, but they have an occipital bone that is really protruding. And as soon as we expose that occipital bone, when we look at that person from the profile, we automatically add length to the nose. So utilize your chat function and tell me if you have experienced that before. Okay, and that's perfectly okay if we haven't. So we're going to move on to a mid fade. So a mid fade, we can see actually goes is basically right at that temple peak point. So if we think of it, that we're moving slightly above the occipital bone. And then we move into a high fade, and we see that the fade goes above that temple peak point. But again, as I've already stated, there's one very consistent thing with all three of those, is that if we look at that head form, especially on the right side, we can see that there's been length and a little bit of weight preserved as well, because we know that every person has that flat spot. And what we want to avoid is showing that flat spot. Now, we start getting into the different fade types. A bald fade is probably one of the most popular because a bald fade is basically executed with all electrical equipment, okay? You can use a combination of maybe trimmers, clippers, and to be quite honest, I can do a bald fade using no electricity and just a pair of shears. I can tell you right now that it takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to execute it, but it can be done. Another thing that can also be used on a bald fade as well to get even closer to the skin would be a foil shaver. So just keep in mind that a bald fade, usually it's 100% electrical equipment is being used. On a skin fade, that's going to be a combination of electrical equipment and lather and a straight razor. So when we think of the difference between a bald fade and a skin fade is exactly what it sounds like. That fade is taken directly down to nothing but the skin. Now, I can also tell you from personal experience that a skin fade can also be executed with a foil shaver as well. I know that especially in the barbering world, and I know that I have a lot of cosmetologists on this webinar, and depending on your state regulations, you probably can't use a straight blade. You might be able to use maybe a nape razor or a feather razor, which can most certainly be used as well. But I know that there's been certain times that I have lather on somebody's skin and I start to razor that skin. And then I come back and look and I see the little red dots start to form, which basically means that on the skin, that there are little invisible marks that obviously I can't see with my eye. And in that instance, I have to take all precautions and tell the guest that, you have a lot of invisible bumps that I can't see with my eye. I'm going to discontinue the service with lather and straight blade, clean everything up, and then switch into a foil shaver. If a foil shaver is used in the correct manner, you can get all the way down to the skin with that as well. Then we go into a drop fade, which a drop fade is, again, very self-explanatory because it creates that arcing shape. So we're low in the front hairline and we go up over the ear and then we immediately drop as we go behind the ear. Now my question to you, and utilize your chat function for this, between a bald fade, a skin fade, and a drop fade, what do you guys see as the most popular in the states that you all live in? I'm curious. Because I live in southern Texas and I see a lot of bald fades and a ton of skin fades. Bald fade. Bald fade, good. Bald. I would say that currently today, that when we're looking at social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Google search, I would say that bald fade is probably hands down the most popular that we see. Now, when we talk about fading guidelines, we always want to work. Yes. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So I'm a cosmetology student for about a year now, and my husband, I perform, I guess it would be called a drop fade on him. And he has excess skin on the back of his head. I call them like hot dogs. We joke about it. But my question is, he's military. So when I'm fading him down, because I go to the skin, I use the, I'm in Maryland, so I use the device you mentioned to get the skin effect, just like a razor. And then
the foil shaver?
Yes, thank you, foil shaver. And then on the top, he's about a 7. So as I'm doing that fading in the back, because the excess skin is like down past the occipital, I guess my question is, how do you overcome that? What is, I've been trying to find someone to answer this question because I don't know how to. That gives me trouble every single time. I don't know if you've come across that in your profession.
No, sure, yeah, and it really, I mean, that's an absolutely great question. So my question to you is what do you feel like is the most challenging part of that for you? Is it the fact that you don't want it, that you guys don't want to expose that, or do you feel like you're moving past that and you don't know what to do with the hair that's left in between?
The second part, I mean, I don't have a problem and he doesn't have a problem with me, like obviously you have to move the skin, you have to move it up and down to get the hair in between, but it's like, he's very particular. He wants the lower tapered fading, at the bottom. He doesn't want a middle or a high because he's kind of got a bigger head. So it's kind of like, how do I make that transition occur when it's literally the excess hair is like right down there? It's kind of, because it's kind of hard to, I don't know if I have to transition more below it or that's kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I know. Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. My suggestion is that you transition below the access skin.
Okay.
Usually, usually when I run into that, and to be quite honest, I run into that probably more times than I don't.
Right.
From personal experience, you know, I tend to, even though when I just said, that when we work at eye level, I think sometimes we can get so engrossed and so close looking at something that we almost kind of lose focus on exactly what we're doing. And the reason that I'm saying that is I always used to find myself, I would always keep the head in an upright position. And I was always finding myself thinking, okay, where that extra skin is that actually just, shadow from the light, or am I actually transitioning it too high?
Okay.
So instead of having the head in an upright position, if you basically tell him, put your chin to your chest, that will automatically put the head at an angle. And let's say that you place that clipper right on the nape of the neck. And when we fade hair, we do the arcing motion or the C stroke, and we're fading up, and away from the head, right? Not going in teeth first, but with the blade or the guard flat against the skin. When that head is tilted so far forward, by the time that you place that on the skin, and by the time that you exit your C stroke, you're really only going to be moving up about that high. So my suggestion is to move that head as far forward as you can. The thing is, you can always go up higher by simply moving the chin up slightly, and slightly. Me personally, especially when I'm dealing with the extra skin on the back, is I like to be very cautious of it, because there's some men out there that they know they have it, and they flat out, they're like, I want a high fade. I know I have 4 or 5, extra, literally rolls of skin back there, but I don't care. And then there's some guys that I will come across, they're like, absolutely under no circumstance do I want any of that exposed. So again, whether they want it exposed or not, I always like to be on the side of caution and really tilt that head forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. Check the mirror when blending. I know if any of you were on the call earlier with Daniel Dunworth, let me tell you something about the mirror. Traditionally in barbershops, we're always faced away from the mirror. I cannot tell you at how many, how do I put this, strange haircuts I've done. Or let me rephrase that, strange places that I've done a haircut. I've done haircuts in an elevator that was broken, and I was stuck in there for 2 hours. I've done them in hotel rooms. I've done them in a back alley before. And I can tell you right now that when you don't have a mirror to use as a reference point, it makes your job very, very hard. I can tell you right now that there are 2 things on your face that are always going to lie to you, and we use them to see. Your eyes will always lie to you. The mirror is never going to lie. I promise you. The mirror can be your best friend, and it can be your worst nightmare at the same time. I can tell you that, let's say I'm going to do a bald fade, and maybe I'm going to take trimmers to the skin, because they don't have a lot of hair, to begin with, because maybe they're coming in every 2 weeks. I'm right-handed, so I always tend to start on the right side. I work to center back, and then I come left side to center back. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. I might not look in the mirror, and then all of a sudden I look in the mirror and I see, okay, now the lines are even, because I start chasing that line. However, if I use the mirror to use as my reference point after I've executed right side to center back, I can already see where my reference point is. Another big thing when we talk about blending, I can tell you that when I fade hair, after the bulk of the hair is off and I'm starting to refine everything, maybe transitioning from zone 1 into zone 2 or zone 2 into zone 3. When I'm looking at that, I'm constantly turning the chair and I'm using that mirror. There's a lot of times that if maybe I'm working on the left side and I happen to look in the mirror, I might actually put my finger on the spot that I want to work at, turn the mirror or face the guest back in the chair, work on it, and face it again. So always working at eye level, always using the mirror as well. You want good, even lighting from above and work and in front of your work as well, because I can guarantee you, and please use your chat function to talk about this as well. How many times does the light play tricks on your eyes? I'm very curious to know, especially from a learner standpoint as well. All the time, constantly, always. Yeah, so, here's the thing about lighting. And whether we're talking about a barbershop or a salon, I mean, I've been in even some schools where they might have the most beautiful light fixtures. However, it's not very conducive to actually being able to actually see your work. Before I moved to Texas, I lived in Indiana, and one of my friends owned a salon, and at each workstation, there was one recessed can light above every single station. Now, we know that recessed can lighting is good for one thing, putting light right here. That's it. And I know that that was one of the biggest struggles of those stylists, were really trying to figure out how like all of this lighting is really playing tricks on my eyes, and I really don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So lighting, I'm really good to see that, that first of all, I'm not the only one where, light, tends to play tricks on the eyes. I mean, there's even times that I've been in a fading competition before. And one of the tools that I always put in my bag is, like the old coal miner light that, straps on to your head. I will actually have one of those on my forehead just in case there isn't enough lighting where I can turn that light on and it is really focusing on the area that I'm working on. So that really does make a big difference. Now, you want to turn the client to see different areas with similar lighting as well. So again, those chairs are made to move. I always usually will tell people that, unless you're doing something very specific, the client really just shouldn't be staring at themselves in the mirror. They should constantly be moving. Outlining. Outlining is a stand by. Okay. Outlining is a very big thing for me. And this is a cutting technique, obviously used to define the hairline. Let me get my chat box open because I want y'all to answer this for me. How many of you are scared to death to outline? How many requests do you get for somebody that says, I want that super crisp outline? And that's okay if you don't. Maybe you haven't experienced it yet. I think a good cautionary thing for outlining is don't take the hair too far outside of its natural hairline, if in fact you are going to outline. So there are some guidelines to outlining. The sideburns influence the profile and the overall look. Adapt the nape outline shape to the width and length of the neck. Determine if front hairline needs to be outlined through the temple and the sides. This, to me, is probably one of the biggest things. Don't push or cut natural front hairline back. There's a lot of times that I've been in both salons and barbershops that they'll use the comb to hold the hair and then start to outline that way. But we know that literally the rule of theory is that as soon as we start to push the hair outside of its natural fall and we start to cut, what happens? We end up either being way, way too short, or we take the outline way, way back a lot further than what we anticipated. So a tapered outline. A tapered outline, I can tell you right now from my own personal experience, is what I enjoy doing the most. When we're looking at this model on the right-hand side, yes, I will tell you right now that we might see two distinct lines going from right behind the ear to the nape of the neck. But the thing that we see that's consistent on both sides of that is that we actually haven't removed any hair that's outside of its natural fall. And then when we're looking at the very bottom of the nape, we can see that we see very minimal transparency, but we see what? We see just a little bit of that wispy hair, right? On the very, very bottom of that nape. I can tell you right now that a tapered outline is going to grow out the most natural because we have not removed any hair from the natural form. When we look at a blunt outline, meaning that we have three very distinct boxy lines, right, left, center. So I would like you to use your chat function and tell me whether you prefer seeing a tapered outline or a blunt outline. Tapered, 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 blunt, tapered, tapered. It's more authentic. Very good. So to kind of go along with outlining, we also have different shapes that we can make as well. We can see that moving from left to right, on the left-hand side, we have a very distinct square shape. In the middle, we have a nice round shape. But then on the right, we have that really nice, soft, tapered look as well. Straighter lines result in a very masculine look. I think from a tapering standpoint, I can tell you right now that when I am in a salon and not in a barbershop, and maybe I'm cutting women's hair, and maybe I'm doing a short pixie, I personally, I like a nice feathered soft outline, because the last thing that I would ever want to do to a woman, unless she told me that she wanted a very boxy or a very masculine look, I would keep it as soft and feminine as possible. You know, curved lines result in a softer look. Those are going to be more requested probably by the female clientele. Rounded outline is an alternative for clients with a wider neck who want a blunt outline, because that actually sometimes, as counterintuitive as it sounds, it can actually make their neckline seem a little slimmer. Now comes to the part where it is probably the most intimidating, are the hair graphics and hard parts. Use your chat function and tell me if you've done any hair graphics or hard parts. Or if anybody has scared to death to even attempt a hair graphic, or maybe even scared to execute a hard part. You know, hard parts to me, I've told you that when I worked for Rusel, you know, those guys are really the first ones that actually started the whole hard part trend. I've seen some hard parts that look really, really good. I've also seen some hard parts that might start very thin, and then they end up getting really, really thick. And then it basically just looks like the C's are parting. See, I want to on my son, scared to death of hair graphics, LOL. I give my son a hard part, not a long line, good. I do hard parts all the time, but graphics are scary. My boyfriend is letting me practice. You know what? And really, that's great. To me, when I got into barbering, and even when I'm talking about not even doing hair graphics, when I just even wanted to start a hard part, you know how you get that gut wrenching feeling, like right below your heart, right above your stomach, and you just feel it just wrenching back and forth. To be quite honest, that's how I felt when I was starting to do hard parts. And I can tell you that I was also, you could peel the t-shirt off of my back when I started doing hair graphics as well. I can tell you right now that I practice on mannequins all the time when it comes to hair graphics. My rule of thumb is if you can get a hair graphic or a hard part to look remotely good on a mannequin, when you execute on a human head, it'll look even better, because we all know what it's like to work on a mannequin head as well. Facial hair transitions. So this is kind of the part that I was telling you where it's a really critical part on the overall success of what the overall look is going to look like. Even if we're looking at the gentleman on the left-hand side where he has a lot of long hair, and even the guy on the right-hand side where, you know, it is a fade, but we don't see a lot of transparency. But if we take the gentleman on the left and we see that there's a very long beard, or I'm sorry, longish beard, is how do we really transition into the hair without it looking super, when I say supernatural, I don't mean like it looks really natural looking, I mean supernatural, and it doesn't look right at all. My advice is, when you practice on a mannequin, what I like to do is I like to start longer. And I love using the guards, especially for transitioning facial hair into the actual hairline. Depending on what side of the head that I'm working on, I will usually start with I'll usually use the shape of the beard to actually start that transition line. And to me, I might put a guard on and I might open up my clippers as far as they can go, and I might touch the head and zero hair might be coming off. But I would much rather start to close that blade slightly and hear just a little bit of that hair coming off than to take a huge amount off to begin with. Use your chat function to tell me if any of you have had to experience transitioning hair into a faded haircut. I'll give you a couple more examples as well. Yes, so, you know, to kind of really, I guess, explain it, how important it is to, you know, to really understand it at blending a beard in with a fade would be probably these two images here, especially when we're looking at the left side here, or this gentleman on the left. You know, we see a lot of warmth in that beard, and we see that he's very fair-skinned as well. So we really have to be very cautious of how well we're blending that in, so it just doesn't look like we just completely just disconnected everything. And then here's the beard, we have a harsh line, and then we move into the fade as well. And then with the gentleman on the right hand side as well, having really, really dark facial hair, and then trying to blend that into a bald fade as well. So with that, I want to basically open up the floor. I want you guys to feel free to either utilize your chat box, or, you know, to be quite honest, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you would like to ask. You know, I'm very laid back. I'm very easygoing. I don't bite. So again, when I say I want to open up the floor, I mean, I legitimately want to open up the floor. Like I want you guys to be able to ask anything that you want. You know, maybe there's something that we went over that you need a little bit more further clarification on, or you just want, you know, maybe just a little bit of advice as well. So with that, you guys go right ahead.
Do you use a certain brand of mannequin for your men cuts?
I always am pivot point mannequins, always, hands down. You know, the reason for that, not only do I work for Pivot Point, but when you look at a male mannequin from Pivot Point, maybe versus a competitor, there's a few different reasons. One, Pivot Point mannequins, the hair is, you know, it's 100% human hair. Every hair on that head is actually hand implanted. So there's no machine that actually goes through and, you know, really does the implanting. It's actually somebody individually putting those, you know, putting the hair in. There's no double stitching along the hairline. There's actually sometimes around the temple area, and definitely in the nape area, there's hair that's actually been implanted outside of the natural neckline to give you even more of what a natural head would look like. The ears are bendable a little bit. They don't fold all the way down like a human head would, but they do move a little bit. And they are also, the hair on the sides and back is implanted differently. So they're actually implanted at an angle. So I know that when I've faded on a other mannequin that's implanted straight, that when we try to fade it, the shorter you take the hair does what? It sticks straight out. Where on a pivot point mannequin, the hair is actually angled. So instead of it coming out, it actually goes more towards the floor to give you more of that realistic look as well. If anybody's looking for pivot point mannequins as well, you can go to pivotpointshop.com, and there's usually always you know, some sort of deal going on, or you know, promotion as well. Do you have an Instagram to follow? Yes, I do, and I will type it in for everybody right now. My Instagram is Corey W. Hawkins. It'll be a black and white picture that comes up of me. I'm also going to give my email address. Let's see, and do you hold clipper cutting classes online? Currently, I do not, but that is definitely something that, Pivot Point is looking at. I can tell you right now that from an Instagram standpoint, if anybody were to ever have any questions about anything, anybody that sends me a direct message, I will always get back to you. Again, I think it's very important for you to know that, I mean, especially with kind of the state that everything is in right now, and everybody doing a lot of this, you know, distance education and all that, you know, you guys might end up having more questions than maybe even you thought that you had. So Anybody that ever sends me a direct message, I always get back to, and I welcome any types of questions as well. Maybe it's advice on maybe what to do after you graduate. Maybe you're having a certain issue with men's cutting, women's, literally anything. I'm pretty much an open book. Anybody have anything else? Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, dilemmas, issues? See, my school posted this class on our Facebook page. How can I find other classes you and other point instructors are teaching? So if you go to the lab site, it will give you a schedule of our live webinars, which is posted every Friday. And then there are also pre-recorded sessions as well. Awesome class, thank you. You're absolutely welcome. See, somebody asked, what is the lab site? Tiffany, if you want to send me a DM on Instagram, or if you want to send me an email, I'd be more than happy to explain a little bit more about that. Shout out from Fort Scott Community College Cosmetology School. Awesome class, thank you. You guys are very, very welcome. Fort Scott, you know that you guys hold a special place in my heart. Blades, you guys know that you hold a special place in my heart as well. So it is so awesome to see, people that, I know on here that I've formed relationships with. But again, just a huge thank you for taking the time out of your day to, to be able to participate in this as well. So if nobody else has anything if love you too, Wanda. If nobody else has anything that they want to add, I'll keep this open for another minute or so. But if nobody else has anything to add, we are done. But like I said, I would like to keep this open for another minute or two, just so in case anybody else has anything that they want to add or ask, feel free to.
I have a question about like blending the longer hair on top with a fade. Do you usually use your clippers or do you use your shears? Because I get nervous. I don't want to take like that. I don't want to take it all the way off. I'm like terrified to go in with my clippers and then take like a chunk out.
Sure. So I guess my answer to that is I will usually use that as a case-by-case basis. There are certain times that I would use my shears. There are certain times that I would use my clippers as well. I think it all depends on what type of fade that I'm doing. I can tell you right now that if I personally like to use, if you were to ask me, what's the percentage of time that you're using your clippers to blend that, I would probably say probably 80% of the time I'm using clippers, and I can fully understand and appreciate how nerve-wracking that can be. Just be very mindful of, I would not use a guard to blend that in. I would actually do that clipper over comb. A lot of times when I clipper over comb, just be mindful of the angle that you're holding your comb as well. And a lot of times when I clipper over comb, I will actually clipper over comb with a guard on. Now, some people ask me, they're like, why would you clipper over comb with a guard on? Two reasons. One, that acts as a safety net for me, so I don't take too much hair off too quickly. And that also leaves the hair very soft. Think of it as if you were going to blend where the fade is with maybe some of the hair that's in the crest or the parietal ridge. Even if you were to shear over comb that, think of a shear leaving that very blunt, clean line, right? But let's say we use a clipper, and let's say the hair is like, maybe we did a low fade, and as we're progressing upward, maybe that hair is actually a little bit longer. So maybe I can clipper over comb with maybe a number 1, 1.5, maybe even a 2. That leaves that hair, because I can't just use one pass and have all that hair come off. I'm probably gonna have to do 3 or 4 passes for that hair to come off. Now, the more if I'm using something that's going to take me 3 or 4 passes to come off, how soft do you think I'm leaving the hair? It's going to leave it really soft and not super blunt. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. Okay, guys. Well, if nobody else has anything, again, I thank you profusely from the bottom of my heart for taking that time out of your day. And we look forward to seeing everybody on future webinars. Everybody take care.